Hello and welcome to Nothing Exempt. I am Brian Piotr and I'm here with my co-host Nicholas Pardini. And today on the show we are going to talk about Saudi Arabia. And I thought
This
that there
topic
was no better
require a drink.
I thought there was no better way to do this. This is the most this is the most hilarious thing I can do when we talk about Saudi Arabia. I'm holding some scotch that I got from my friend Sage for my birthday because I just turned 30. And I'm going to drink it out of my I Heart Jesus shot glass. Neither of these things would be allowed in Saudi Arabia, and that's why I'm doing them. So, on the show today, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but I think the most fun place to start would be the Crown Prince and his antics. Nick, where would you like to begin today?
Okay, here are my thoughts on Mohammed bin Salman. Even though he's technically the crown prince and not the king, he has the leading authority on the military, and he has a lot of the say because his father, who's in charge, is advanced in age and has delegated a lot of responsibility to Mohammed bin Salman, who's I think about 32. He's not much older than us, and what he is doing is he's trying to reform his country to be more progressive. He allowed women to drive. He has a lot of female government officials in his staff. And he has done crackdowns on certain princes who thought was arresting them to solve corruption, but it later turned out to be basically he was just trying to shake people down for money to finance some of his projects.
Yeah, he put a bunch of the royal family in the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh until they paid up.
Yeah. So, but he's trying to build a futuristic city called Neom, right on the Red Sea coast near the Israeli and border, which is also close to the Egyptian border, the Sinai Peninsula. He is trying to have an economic plan to make Saudi Arabia a diverse economy outside the oil industry by 2030. And it's too early to say whether this guy is a real reformer who's going to make a real difference or he's just a typical Saudi king who has no idea what he's doing. He's done his fair share of ridiculous things. Like he's bought the most expensive piece of art in the world in an auction for $700 million. I think he also bought the biggest yacht in the world just because. And now the rumors are that he's leading the drive for the Saudi pension fund to buy Tesla Motors. Which if he does that probably puts me on the side of this guy doesn't know what he's doing.
Okay, well, let's begin with the city of Neom. I get the feeling that this is what happens when you have more money than you know what to do with, and you just come up with these crazy ideas. And the perfect example of a crazy idea for a multi-billionaire would be, hey, we're going to build a giant tech city in the middle of the desert. And everybody's going to want to be there because Saudi Arabia is going to be awesome, like Paris or London or New York. People are going to, or it's going to be the new Silicon Valley. We're going to create a giant Silicon Valley in the middle of the desert that anybody's going to want to come to. Like, what are the odds of success you put on Neom becoming a productive city that produces more than it costs?
How much time do we need?
50 to 100 years.
50 to 100 years, 20 to 25% chance.
See, I don't get what the impetus is for some country to move there.
Well, if the demographic trends happen the way they are and the world becomes an Islamic majority world, then a lot of the social restrictions that prevent people from going there won't be there. It won't really matter.
But as a corporation, why would you want to have your headquarters someplace where they could just seize your company?
No taxes.
Yeah, so there's no taxes, but how many years have to go by before you actually trust the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to not nationalize you or take advantage of you or imprison some random CFO or COO or some officer in your corporation there for something silly, like letting his wife drive to the supermarket when she was 24?
They do with the American expats in Aramco. They have their separate suburb that looks like a piece of Phoenix. in the middle of Saudi Arabia, and they could drink, they can have the women dress and do whatever they want, but it has to be within that little block.
Well,
So
that's not the premise of Neom. Neom is supposed to be this giant new tech city.
it would have it'd be a free zone to have less social restrictions, but how much less is less social restrictions? We don't know.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the society there. I know that we were talking about it earlier today. You found out what the average age, or like the normal median age, is to get married in the country for men and women.
Yeah, it's 25 for men and 20 for women.
That's not shocking at all. But you were talking about the how old you could be when you could get married, and it was like
No, there is no age minimum for marriage there, and there are examples where like wealthy older men have like bought like 10-year-old girls from their fathers, and a lot of women get married off at 16, 17 years old there, but the average is about 20. These are according to official statistics, which means half under 20.
Well, Nick, how much money would someone need to pay you to let you give away your 12-year-old daughter to a 70-year-old man?
I don't think there would be any amount of money.
Exactly, but I don't get why that is a thing that happens in Saudi Arabia.
Well, it's a cultural difference.
I think that's wrong no matter what your culture is.
I mean, Muhammad married a 9-year-old as like his fourth or fifth wife. I don't know the exact number. So
yeah, I mean, Muhammad was a pedophile in the modern definition. So that's not an accusation for anybody listening. That's just what he was.
So I mean, that's part of their culture. I mean, some of the more progressive members of society are complaining and want an age minimum, but as of right now, there isn't one.
So going into the acquisition of Tesla and the plans to move away from oil, I don't think there's any real success stories out there. Do you think that Saudi Arabia could be the first one?
What, to move away from oil?
Yeah.
There's a few. Texas.
I can't say that Texas has ever really moved away from oil.
It's starting to right now. It's diversified its economy quite a bit.
They've diversified their economy successfully, but they have always been reliant on oil and continue to be reliant on oil. A lot of the nation's refineries are in Texas, and a lot of the industries that create the products for the oil industry are in Texas. And a lot of the companies that operate around the country and in the Gulf are based in Houston. So it's never moved away from oil. Like that is an oil state, and it always will be. Even if oil runs out, I feel like that country, sorry, it is a country, but that state is centered on the industry. Like all the corporations that are there and all the technology centers that are there for oil and all the refineries that process much of the nation's oil and international oil are there. And that's not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, other places that have a big oil economy that have diversified to a certain degree are Canada, Bahrain, Dubai. I mean, not the rest of the United Arab Emirates, but Dubai is somewhat diversified.
Tell me about the Bahrain story. I don't know anything about Bahrain.
Bahrain is the first Gulf state to run out of oil.
So what do they do with their economy now? Tourism?
Well, I mean, they still have some, but it's not enough. That the end is nigh is really the more accurate term. But yeah, they have tourism. They have, I guess, they have more skilled, like specialty jobs. I don't know exactly the whole story, but I know that they had to diversify their economy because they're running out of oil, and it's just a tiny little island, so they didn't have that much oil to begin with.
And there's something to be said for city-states being treated separately than countries. So city-states like Hong Kong, Singapore.
Bigger than a city-state.
Bahrain is a city-state. The country's the size of Long Island. How is it not a city-state?
And then the other thing with Bahrain, too, is that they have the most progressive social policy of any country in the Gulf states because they kind of have to. in order to make
Like,
up.
how so? What makes the social policy more liberal? They
Uh,
let women drive at 18.
I think I'm not really sure exactly what the terms are, so I don't want to like say stuff. But that's what I read is that they have just more rights for women and non-Muslims and other groups than in other parts of that part of the world.
Okay, so let's get back to Saudi Arabia. What's the next thing to talk about?
Well, I mean, the thing is that Brian, I think the big problem with Neom, which we didn't get into, is attracting talent from non-Islamic parts of the world. Given all of the social restrictions and the bad climate for most of the year because it's so hot there in the summer, what would even with no taxes, what would it take for you to move to Saudi Arabia?
I don't know if there's a dollar amount that I would ever move there. As an engineer, and you were willing to pay me 10 times what I could get in Israel, which I'd be willing to live in Israel because it's a Mediterranean climate, for much less. But Neom in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia, I would feel like $1 million a year would be a maybe. But that's just me. There's plenty of people out there who are in desperate need of a job that would take a lot less.
Well, there's
And it
accountants.
could
I know a lot of accountants who've lived there for a while, and they basically, since they don't have to spend anything because their living costs are covered by their company and they don't have to pay any taxes, they just sock a bunch of money away for a few years and come back with a little nest egg. I guess that's what you do if you need to catch up on your retirement.
Yeah, I mean, there's times to do that. My grandfather and grandmother were in Saudi Arabia for multiple years and then retired immediately after their service there, working for Honeywell on the oil. I don't know what part of the industry he worked on actually, but he was in controls, so he could have worked on any part of it, midstream or downstream or upstream. But I think there's plenty of single men that might be interested, but I'm not sure why you'd move your family there and start a family there if you weren't Muslim. Seems like you need to have both.
Well, I mean, you can't. I mean, the rule is like if you're not Muslim, you have to convert in order to marry into one of those families.
But in order to live there and be a citizen, is it going to be the same way?
I don't think they would give you citizenship.
So what would be the point of immigrating there? I guess you could work there for a couple of years.
Expat and come back when you're done.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Do you want to move on to talking about geopolitics?
No, I want to talk about what is just about if you're a young person who is a Saudi, what do you do there?
You don't watch movies. You don't smoke. You don't dance. You don't see the opposite sex at all, no matter where you go. Board games with other people of the same sex, I guess. Is that illegal too? I feel like anything that sounds fun is probably against some kind of fatwa.
But yeah, it seems like it would not be a fun. I mean, this is I think what if Mohammed bin Salman he is serious about reforming his country, what he needs to do is he needs maybe not turn it into like America or European levels of libertine behavior for their standards, but what you can do is just allow young people to have fun somewhere. They'll be able to go out and do stuff. I mean, they probably sneak out like and do things, but like I can maybe understand if you banned one of those things, like drinking or dating restrictions or movies or whatever your culture. But if you have like all these restrictions, like
And not to mention the giant firewall they have that prevents you from doing anything online. In 2018, when all the exciting things you can do in the world can happen online, virtual reality, video games, you want to play Xbox Live, all these things get blocked off to you.
do you think the Saudis are able to watch this show?
Well, I'm pretty sure you can get around any firewall, but I doubt that this show is going to be readily available to very many people. Because I bet that YouTube is mostly blocked off.
Yeah, I mean that's what kind of life is that? And I mean, the government pays off the citizens enough, whether it's directly through subsidies or indirectly through really cushy jobs that they don't have to work very many hours, and get paid over their skill level to like pacify the masses. But after a while, I mean, I'd get agitated if I had no freedom to do what I want, or have nothing to do in my free time. Like that's, I think the biggest risk is that as long as oil prices are high and they can pay these generous subsidies, things will be fine. But if oil prices stayed back down where they were a few years ago, or oil becomes less important to the economy globally, and they can't pay off their people, you're going to see some real trouble there.
Well, speaking of like the potential trouble, besides the fact that they're a huge state sponsor of terrorism, they fight wars in Yemen, and they do things that are just distasteful in general. But say they do run out of oil, or they get on the opposite side of America for some really big reason. We've been selling weapons to them for years. We've armed them to the teeth, and we have bases there. Like, how intertwined are our geopolitics, and can we unwind ourselves if we need to? Are we like blood brothers with them? If they started a war with Iran at this point, are we committed to a war with Iran immediately?
I mean, that's a good question. But the other question is that I understand why this alliance was made, because the Saudis needed protection from Iran and Iraq and other aggressive neighbors, and we needed their oil. So that's how this alliance developed. But as the U.S. produces more of its own oil, or can get it from other sources such as Canada, Mexico, Venezuela, if they ever get their act together.
Yeah, right.
Does it still serve us to work with these guys? I mean, you always hear about like all these terrorists from like Afghanistan and wars in Iraq and Syria and all these other places. But you know where the 9/11 hijackers were from?
They're all Saudi.
You know who finances all of the most radical sect of Islamic schools and mosques all over the world, whether it's in Europe or more moderate Islamic countries such as Indonesia, the Middle East, even I think in the United States they have some Saudi-backed mosques. The Saudis. You give money through, and you give weapons to people who are sabotaging you at the same time. Like, really, like, it's like with Trump, what's going on with Turkey and Erdogan threatening financial penalties for them not releasing an American pastor. I mean, the Saudis have done way more than Erdogan has done to undermine the United States. Nobody in like foreign policy circles or the establishment or the elite or whoever you'd like to call them ever calls these people out.
I know, and it's like we bow our knee to them whenever they have a problem with us. Like the King Abdullah last time came with George W. Bush, was making all sorts of demands that we caved to. I don't understand why they're in such a power position in the region, and why it really matters to us.
Well, I mean, I guess it's hard for old alliances to die, and they still do have a lot of oil.
So what? The world is full of oil. We can buy it from
Iran has
else.
a lot of oil. I think it would make, why can't we work with them? Like, they have a society with a higher rate of women's education than any country in that part of the world. Their people want to modernize and westernize. We used to work with them in the past prior to some dubious CIA stuff. I mean, it's pretty tense on both sides now, and they do have some Russia ties, which are concerning. But why is it the case that we have the side with the Saudis and Iran is on the other side? If there was an alien from Mars, it makes sense that it'd be the reverse.
Yeah, well, also the fact that we are able to have these kind of relationships with the Saudis who, cut your hands off for X, Y, and Z and treat women like they're parcels of land. Yet we can't do deals and we can't buy oil from Venezuela. Like, why do we have principles in one place and not in the other? It's inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean it's, and then the thing is, my question is with the weapons is how competent are is the Saudi military in even using our weapons?
They're trained by Americans, all of them. They're pilots, everybody. We have American advisors teaching them how to use everything. They're as competent as any American. At least the officers are. A lot of their officers have been trained at West Point. They're American trained military. So they're incredibly competent in using our arms.
Then how come they haven't been able to resolve Yemen?
Same reason we haven't been able to resolve Afghanistan. You're blowing up dirt huts with $100,000, $200,000 bombs. What are you trying to accomplish? The people that are left are going to be angry at you. So what's the end game there? I don't know.
Well, that's the other thing with Osama bin Laden is a Saudi. I think he's from like the family that owns the biggest construction company in the country.
He was, but Saudi Arabia is an ally. And so I have no idea why we decided that Afghanistan was a good idea to invade.
Well, that's where he went to go hide. That's why.
Yeah, but why can't you send SEAL teams? Why do you have to send 50,000 Americans, 30,000 Americans? It makes zero sense. Like, I get sending 5 different SEAL teams around the country to get the guy and all his partners. I don't understand sending all the Army and Marines that we have and invading the country. That is just stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it's relatively, at least there was a reason for it, unlike Iraq. But
Iraq was, we feel like doing it, so let's invent a reason and then go do it. That's what I think. I don't even think that's conspiratorial. Like, my dad actually thinks that we went in there for WMDs and that was a mistake, that we didn't find any. Like, do you actually think that everybody at the top really believed they were going to find WMDs and that was the whole reason for going to Iraq? Like, what's the reality of the situation, Nick?
No, I think the reality of the situation is that the ideology that dominated the GOP at the time, neoconism or neoconservatism, was basically the belief that America's power is peaking and we need to flex our muscles while we still can. And so we need to use it to try to spread democracy around the world.
What about the fact that they changed to the Euro contracts for oil? Do you think that had anything to do with it?
I don't think that was the main reason for it, no. I think it was just ideology.
Okay. Well, I would put that as a higher odds than actually believing in WMDs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they really wanted to. I mean, also their Halliburton ties. I think had something to do with it too. And Cheney. Defense and contracting companies wanted projects to do. But yeah, I mean, I think the main reason though is just this false ideology that it's America's job to spread democracy around the world. Like, if you're going to do an empire, I'm not really for imperialism necessarily, but if you're going to do an empire, do it correctly. Like, actually annex the land, convert the people to your language and religion, make it so that you have trade restriction with its neighbors so you can extract the resources. I mean, the British did it right. The Ottomans did it right. A lot of these older empires, French mostly did their empires right. America doesn't do empires right.
No, because we say we're promoting a democratic nation and then we leave it to fall apart. And that we've done that plenty of times.
Problem is the American people, and I'm not saying that this is wrong, probably is correct, do not have the political will to go in, take over a country and occupy it and put in the work and spend all the resources that you need to rebuild it and control it for however long you need to reform those people. It doesn't take just like a few years of occupation and say, oh, you have have some sham election, say, oh, you're a American style democracy now. No, it takes generations of raising a new elite from scratch, like what the British did in India and other places.
Oh, well, India is not a prime example of a successful country at this time.
It's a lot more successful than What happened to countries that America's occupied and let go?
I don't know. Is Iraq really that far behind India?
Yes.
Yeah. In what ways?
India's economy is one of the fastest growing in the world.
Yeah,
India,
but you're adding up 10 times the number of people.
no, but grow GDP growth rates.
Yeah, but apart from GDP growth rates, look at actual GDP per capita.
I still think, on a per capita basis, it's one of the fastest growing economies in the world.
I'll admit to it being growing, but I won't admit to it being in a better place than Iraq today.
And it has no, like, they've managed, despite having one of their hated enemies right next to them, to not get involved in any major wars.
Why are those? Why is the hated enemy right next to them, Nick?
Because it's the ethno-religious conflict.
Nope. Why are India and Pakistan hated enemies?
Because they were basically, one was the Muslim population and one was the Hindu population. They didn't want to be part of the same country, and so the British split them up.
The British split them up and picked which one was the Muslim one and which one was the Hindu one.
Your video froze, by the way.
Oh, yeah, yours did too. England, the UK, is responsible for the way they split up Pakistan and India and the results coming from that. Can you hear me, Nick? I can't hear you. I guess we know who had the bad internet connection. And unless he comes back, I'm going to go ahead and say that was probably a good show. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you guys liked my America shirt with the Trump face on it. I'd love to hear your comments and hear what you thought we missed. And let me know what you would like to see in future shows. We're having a guest this Saturday, so tune in. And otherwise, I hope you have a good Wednesday night.